Warning, warning. This episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast comes with a warning label because as I join you from the floor of my office, sitting on the carpet, yes, it's a Podcarpet episode, I want you to know that listening to this episode may completely change your worldview. Not only that, it's going to change your worldview, especially in relationship to the word lazy and being someone who embraces laziness. So, you've been warned. This is episode number 410 of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/410. I want to talk to you today about my relationship with laziness and ease because over the last few months, I have noticed in my course calls, in my group programs, I have had to have this talk with a bunch of people over and over and over again. So I figured it's time for us to bring this conversation to the podcast so that we can all work a little less hard, be a little less burnt out, and at the same time, get better results and feel more successful. Isn't that what we all want? Well, if that's what you want, then it's time for you to embrace your lazy self. I'll explain everything in the episode, so let's dive in. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. So yes, this is a Podcarpet episode of the podcast, which means I may wander off and it's a little conversational, but I really think it's an important conversation for us to have. The reason being is that over the last few months, I have noticed on my course calls and in some of the programs that I've been running that a lot of people seem to struggle with being nice to themselves and with this belief that they have to work hard and harder and the hardest in order to get better results or to get any results. And I want to give you some examples here because I think that they are really insightful as to the different ways that this kind of hustle culture or this culture of you have to work and you have to earn it and you have to be disciplined and you have to do it perfectly and how much it actually impacts us as business owners. So the first one was during Biz Boost, which I ran in May. And in Biz Boost on day one, we do an exercise of stepping into our CEO energy. And at the start of that program, I ask people to rate themselves as the CEO of their business. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself as the CEO of your business? And if it's not a 10 out of 10, or 11 out of 10, then why? What needs to change? What's going on? And it's one of those, I know you kind of moments because as people are sharing in the chat box, I need to be more organized. I need to be more productive. I've got all these mindset problems. I'm so disorganized. And all these things that they need to change about themselves. And then the very next slide, I say, so who decided they needed to change? Who decided they needed a complete personality transplant? And everyone goes, hey, you already knew what we were going to say. And I do because I know my audience so well and I'm very observant, but also I am/was in the same situation that most people experience when they're growing their business. And so in Biz Boost, one of the big drive home messages of the first day is that you do not need to change who you are. Your business actually needs to fit you. And so if you aren't a naturally organized person, you don't need to change who you are. That takes time and effort and it's hard. And instead, you actually just need to set your business up so that it supports you to feel like you've got everything that you need and you know that everything's being done. So systems and structure and team members and environments and the way that you treat yourself and the way that you set yourself up in your business is far easier for you to set up and change and fix and make adjustments to than completely changing who you are as a person. And yet most entrepreneurs go through this journey of thinking that they need to change who they are in order to be successful. And it's not actually true. So that was the first one. Then in our quarter 3 planning in the Heart Centre Business Planning System, so we have our planning posse, we get together for quarterly planning, and so we're doing quarter 3 planning, and we ended up having like a really juicy conversation towards the end of the planning session where one of the statements that I said that got a few ouches in the chat box and a few oof, that hurt, was that I said, if you are continuing to write a to-do list of 30 items for yourself in the morning that you need to get done by the end of the day, you are in essence choosing to feel like a failure that night. Because if you write a to-do list for yourself that requires you to have more time than you have available to yourself, or requires you to juggle 30 different priorities and get them all done in different orders, or like requires you to work and work and work and work, and the chance of you still getting it done is actually slim to nil, you are actively choosing at the start of the day to make yourself feel like a failure at the end of the day. In the Heart Centre Business Planning System, we set ourselves up with 2 things. The first one is that we have a motto, which is big goals, teeny tiny to-do list. And then the second one is that in the planning system itself, each day there's only 4 spots in your to-do list. So you can literally only fit 4 things in there. Now, some people get tricksy and they divide it into 2 and they give themselves 8 things to do. Well, I'm working on those people, but ultimately, our goal is for you to know what are your 4 things that you need to get done today. And then once they're done, that's it. Your day is done. You're complete. That's it. And nowadays I do this for myself. Most days I only have 3 things on my to-do list. And so if I get those 3 things done by 10:30 in the morning, do I feel like I have had a moral failure? No. Do I feel like, oh, that's terrible, I could have done more? No. You know how I feel when I've got my 3 things done at 10:30 in the morning? I feel like a success. I feel like a success pretty much every day, because every day my to-do list is 3, maybe 4 things. So I set myself up in the morning as a kind boss to myself to be a success. So the conversation we had in the planning posse was, are you setting yourself up to be a success each day? Are you setting yourself up so that in the evening you feel like you have nailed it and you're doing amazingly and you're on track? Or are you setting yourself up that at the end of every single day, your to-do list is not complete, you feel like you've not finished, you feel like you've failed, you feel like you're not successful, you haven't done enough? And what is the effect of that on an ongoing long-term basis if you finish every day feeling like nothing is finished? Which belief are you snowballing and expanding? Are you expanding the belief that it's easy to get things done each day and easy for you to succeed? Or are you snowballing the belief that it's hard for you to get things done each day and you never get through your to-do list and there's not enough time in the day and there's too much stuff to do? Because if your experience is that you mostly feel like there's never enough time in the day and you'll never get everything done and you're always feeling behind, that's actually a management issue. That's actually a tasking issue. That is not a I'm too distractible issue. You as a human being do not need to change. You are perfect exactly as you are. You don't need to change. The systems and structures around you need to change. The way that you set yourself up with your strategy as the CEO of your business needs to change. But you as a human do not need to change, because if you needed to change and be more like someone else, you would have someone else's business. You have your business. You are here to create a business that's perfectly suited to who you are as a human being, not create a copy of someone else's business and then try and be like them. And yet that's what a lot of people do. So in the planning call, we had a huge heart-to-heart about setting yourself up to succeed and choosing to just make the goalpost a little easier for you to get that goal and score. And then this week in the Leverage and Launch call, which is my program to help people create and launch online courses, I had a conversation with someone which turned into a big group conversation with everyone who was there on the call about the belief that you choose to focus on. So this person said that she had 2 courses that she wanted to create, and she had looked at her schedule for the next 10 weeks, and in order to basically ensure that she finished it the day before it was due to be talked about at an event, the only way was for her to work every day and work long days and have no downtime. And so we had a conversation about how she could get it done and what's the bare minimum that she needed to do and all that kind of stuff. But then at the end of that, I actually started a conversation with everyone, not just the person who brought this up, but to say, okay, so if at the very outset of a 10-week period of getting some focus and getting something complete, you make a statement like that, the only way I'm going to get this done by the very last day is if I work long days and I work every day and I have scheduled every single minute of every single day and I must get it all done perfectly, you are in essence deciding to go and collect evidence that that is true, that you have to work long days, you have to work every day, and if anything goes wrong, you're done. It's not going to be ready. And is that actually what you want to go and collect evidence of? What I wanted to do was plant the seed that what if you could use this as an opportunity to collect evidence that you get things done faster than you thought? What if you could use this as an opportunity to collect evidence that in order to get this done in time or even get it done early, the best thing you can do is have plenty of time off and look after yourself? And that you are so efficient and you set yourself up with the right environment and the right supports and everything that you need in such an effective way that you can't help but succeed and you can't help but get it finished, but you get it finished earlier. And all I said was, I'm not saying that I know exactly all the detail of what needs to be created, and I'm not going to dive in and discredit or undo any of what it is that you've created. But I just want you to embark upon this journey being mindful of what you're collecting evidence of. And so I want you to consider perhaps choosing, when you have a pop-up belief like that of, I have to work long hours and I have to work every day for the next 10 weeks with no gaps and no downtime in order to get this done, I just want to invite you to ask some curious, playful questions about whether that's actually true and could you collect evidence to the contrary. Because as far as I'm concerned, that belief being the basis upon which your strategy is built is going to reinforce that belief. And I don't really want to reinforce that. I want to reinforce the belief that you can get this done easily. I want to reinforce the belief that it doesn't take long hours for you to get your work done. I want to reinforce the belief that you can have downtime and go for walks and get out in nature and have fun with your family and go and play board games and be a fun auntie and get it done. And so I actually said to the person, I said, that's where I live. I live in a world where I can get my to-do list done by 10:30 each day. I live in a world where the more I look after myself and take downtime and stare off at the trees outside my office, the more effective I am when I actually go to create something, and I create high quality stuff, but it's not perfectionist. Pareto principle says 20% of effort gets me 80% of the results. So if I know what my most effective 20% is to get a really decent 80% of the way there result, why would I then spend the rest of the time, 80% of my day, trying to find teeny tiny incremental improvements and adjustments to what I've created? Now, in this instance, it was recording a course. And so I could absolutely spend, if for every 2 hours of recording modules in my programs, I could absolutely spend another 8 hours re-listening to those modules, putting tiny little edits in, getting rid of the ums and ahs, re-recording ones where there's a teeny sound of me moving a piece of paper in the background. But does that actually make a material difference to people achieving the outcome of working with me or completing that program to the extent where I feel like it's a good return on investment for that extra 8 hours? No, it's not. And so I know that my audience would rather get the content I create when I'm feeling good and I'm nourished and I have lots of downtime with a few little ums and ahs in there than get the content that has all the ums and ahs edited out and is perfectly pre-recorded and there's not one single typo in any little piece of content I ever put out, but I'm a burnt out husk of a human who cannot think straight or get creative in the ways that I put together content or solve problems. Because for me, I've been that person who puts in the extra time, the extra hours, works hard, works diligently, and I can tell you from experience, this version of me is far more relaxed, far better at what she does, far more likely to be able to respond to emails and create content on the fly, far more intuitive and inspired each day, far less likely to have a fear and anxiety meltdown and overthink things. And like, I'm actually a more successful person the lazier I become. And that's the conversation I want us to have today. So, first and foremost, I definitely grew up in an upbringing that was very working class and in an environment where lazy people were morally bankrupt and hardworking people were the good people, the salt of the earth. That was reinforced in my childhood, in school, in university, in my early jobs, and also even in my corporate career when I finished university and went into corporate life, that was absolutely reinforced as well. You want something done, give it to a busy person kind of thing existed. And especially because my first jobs out of university were government jobs, I also saw this huge judgment from the busy, organized people of the lazy, unproductive people. And in government, there is a perception that people who don't perform well can't be fired or, it's a really cushy job. And so you just stick them off in a side office somewhere and they just get to basically not do anything and still get paid. That wasn't my experience in all government roles, but it was certainly my experience in some government roles where I saw the people who were lazy and who weren't necessarily ambitious or diligent, they still got paid the same. They didn't get the same level of respect. They certainly weren't invited to some of the important meetings. They didn't have all the ego stuff. But looking back, when I think about it, like, who's the silly one, right? You can bust yourself working super hard and putting all the extra hours in and, trying to climb the corporate ladder and doing all of these things. And at the end of the day, you'll still get paid exactly the same as someone who doesn't work as hard and actually just kind of does the bare minimum to not get fired. And we are seeing this actually in a shift in the generations. So younger generations coming through are being labeled and judged by older generations as being lazy and being selfish and not being as ambitious and diligent and all that kind of stuff. But part of the reason for that response from the upcoming generations is because they've seen what it got their parents and their grandparents. They are seeing people who are burnt out, who have broken families. They experienced a childhood where they didn't see their parents much or they didn't spend much time with their parents, or the time they spent with their parents, they were all stressed out and everyone was anxious and it wasn't really fun. And so why would they then choose to embrace and embark upon that exact same experience? Now, I'm not saying that certain generations are more hardworking than others or applying any kind of moral high ground to anyone. And the reason being is because, as I said, the more I embrace being lazy in my own business, the more successful I am and the more people I can help and the more amazing content I create. I'm literally sitting on the floor of my office on the carpet, recording this podcast episode with very little preparation, sharing my thoughts with you, and these Podcarpet episodes of my podcast get the most downloads. These Podcarpet episodes of my podcast where I talk about behind the scenes and there isn't necessarily like a structure or, teaching you how to do a certain strategy are the ones that people are most likely to listen to And so, like, why would I stop doing that? Because it feels lazy. Like, I didn't prepare as much. I don't have like 15 bullet points that I'm following in this episode. So, therefore, it's not going to be as valuable. Well, the download numbers beg to differ. And so, I definitely had a lot of work to do from the very first day of starting my business of unhooking this belief that to be lazy is to be bad. And that's why I use the word lazy. Sometimes I'll even say in my introductions and bios, or when I'm having conversations with people, I'll say, I am such a lazy person. And people will jump to my defense. They'll jump to my rescue. No, you're not lazy. You're just really, really efficient. I'm like, no. I'm lazy. And the reason why I actually push back on that is because I love the term lazy, like just the way that it sounds and rolls off the tongue. And the image that it elicits for me is exactly the life I want to lead. It's exactly who I want to be. I want to be lazy. Why wouldn't I? And the more and more I embrace this fact that I'm just really lazy and I'm not going to do it if I don't have to, the more it unlocks this sense of freedom for me, this sense of, okay, well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. That's okay. And so I am still ambitious. I'm still someone who has huge goals. I'm still someone who wants to change the world for the better. I'm still someone who wants to help thousands and thousands of people every single year. I'm still someone who is intelligent and good at problem solving. And like, I am brilliant, right? I have a very high opinion of myself most days. And part of that opinion of myself is that I'm lazy. But the thing is that laziness is my strength because I've built a very efficient and very productive business based on doing what I want to do and doing as little as possible. Now, I know for a lot of people that's going to give you an eye twitch because we've just been conditioned so strongly by society to be workers, to be cogs in the machine, to contribute our labor to the success of other people's businesses. Now, I'm not going to go into a huge unpacking of the working class and industrial revolution, I'm not going to go into any of that. Partly because I haven't prepared for that and thought that through, but also because there are other creators who really get this, like this is their zone of genius and they can do this in a very informed and inclusive way and ensure that they are taking into consideration things like history, slavery, colonization, all those sorts of things. So I'm not going to dive into all of that, but I am just going to touch on the fact that it is in the millionaire, billionaire classes' interests and the government's best interests to convince us that being diligent and being a hard worker and contributing our labor to this concept of our economy, to this concept of productivity, is a morally good thing to do and it's a righteous thing to do, right? However, when it comes to being a business owner, we aren't a contributor to someone else's success and to someone else's dreams. A lot of people, if not most people who have businesses and listen to this podcast, want a lifestyle-oriented business. They started a business because they wanted more financial freedom, more time freedom, more autonomy over how they choose to use their time and energy. They want to contribute something amazing to the world. They want to make a change in the world, and they want to be rewarded and paid for that change and that difference that they're making because they want to have it as a business, right? If you wanted to create that change in the world without being financially rewarded for doing that, you could start a charity. And I mean, don't even get me started on people who start charities and then pay themselves $1 million wages, right? Like there's a whole lot of stories about that. But ultimately, part of societal expectations and beliefs around what makes a good moral person comes from this reinforcement that being someone who works hard and is diligent makes them a good contributor to society, when in fact a lot of that contribution to society is actually just contributing to the profits of billionaires. But anyway, whole nother conversation, as I said. And so we really need to start unpacking this relationship that we have with being lazy and with choosing the easy option. So I want to focus this episode more on talking about my own personal journey and how I have got to the point now where I see my laziness as my strength. Because the fact that I'm lazy and look for the least possible things I need to do and the easiest possible way for me to get things done means that I have time to sit and ponder. And it's in my sitting and pondering time that I come up with completely new ideas. Having this lazy, easy approach to running my business means that if I get inspired to record a podcast episode about being lazy, I can just sit on the floor and record it because I've got time. And I can follow that creative spark when it comes because I got all my things done today before 10:30 in the morning. So I got time. And when I've got time, I have ideas. And when I have ideas and feel inspired, I get to choose whether I follow those ideas and inspiration or whether I park them in my little toy box to play with later, or whether I just give them back to the universe and say, someone else can do that. That's not for me. And it's been really interesting actually over the last few months. I have worked with some VIP clients where I've had sort of half-baked ideas of businesses or products or offers or new things that I wanted to add to my suite of offers in my business, but they were sort of not quite fully formed and they didn't really fit in with what I was doing in my business. And I like to keep things nice and streamlined and I don't like to, add too much to the agenda. And I ended up having like VIP clients pay me to work together or jump into a VIP one-on-one session, and what they were wanting to create was exactly the thing that I had this half-finished project idea about. I even gifted some URLs to a VIP client a few weeks ago because she had this idea to do something. I was like, I've been working on this. This is bizarre. And her face looked shocked and aghast at first. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been working on this. And I told her the name of what it was. And I've worked up this and I've done this and I've done this. And she was like, oh no. And she looked really panicked. And I said to her, you're panicking because you think you can't do it now because I was already working on it? She was like, yeah, a little bit. I don't want to compete with you, Tash. I was like, no, I'm excited to tell you about this because I want you to do it. I want to give all of this to you. And so I even gave her the URLs for it and the names and like half-written messaging documents, and I'd done some Canva templates up of things, and she was just like, oh my goodness. I was like, I 100% believe that this idea came to me when I was sitting on the couch staring out the window at the trees, because energetically or intuitively or, whatever, call it divine inspiration, I knew that this conversation was coming and I wanted to prepare for it. I just didn't know who I was having this conversation with at the time. And so, I really truly believe that I'm able to show up and be that person and be generous with the content I create and be generous with sharing that inspiration and hand these ideas over. Like I reckon I've come up with at least 1,000 different business ideas and 1,000 different product ideas over the last 2 years alone. And I haven't started another business. I haven't done any of that stuff. What I've done is I've poured that into my mentorship of other business owners and saying, oh, have you thought about doing this idea, or you've thought about doing this? And for some people, I didn't even tell them that that's where the idea came from, or that I'd been working on that like 6 months ago and it's sitting in my toy box and I didn't take it any further because I couldn't see how it fit with my own business. I just give it to them. And it's so much fun and it's so powerful. But I can actually step into my zone of genius and step into those strengths because I'm lazy. And think about it, I didn't know at the time that I was going to sell that business idea or that product idea. And in essence, I didn't really sell it. I just gave it away. But that person paid for VIP mentorship with me. And so why wouldn't I give them the best of my ideas? And so in essence, I pre-developed a business idea and some messaging and some content and some structure ready for someone who purchased it. Like, in essence, I sold an idea. And that's such a powerful space for me to be in. And I think it's me in my zone of genius. And so I just want you to ponder on this as you listen to me lazily and long-windedly cover this from different angles. I just want you to think about, like, what kind of zone of genius could you step into if you weren't so stressed all the time? And if you didn't have 45 things outstanding on your to-do list, and when you opened Asana, you had to check 16 folders to find all the tasks that you're behind on right now. Or like when you opened your inbox, you didn't feel a complete like knot in your stomach because, oh my gosh, there's like 45 new emails in there and I don't want to have to deal with them, and I just want to avoid, and I just want to go and sit and eat nachos on the couch and watch Netflix. Right? Imagine what you could create if you had space, if you could breathe, if you stopped overloading yourself. And I'm not saying that like you just stop and you just choose to do nothing and everything will be okay. I am 100% aware that we are in an economic downturn. We have cost of living crunches going on everywhere. We are seeing less consumer confidence, so people are a little more mindful with their spending. And so I'm not about to sit here and say, just do less, just don't do anything, just be lazy, right? I'm not saying that at all. But in my experience, my willingness to embrace doing things the lazy way, choosing to do things the easy way, choosing not to stress myself out, overload myself, the more I practice it, the more joyful my existence becomes, but also the more successful I am as well. And it feels so counterintuitive. And I remember having a conversation with a mentor when I first started my business where I literally said to her, I am more motivated by the stick than the carrot, right? They say you can motivate, I think it's a horse, by the carrot or the stick. Like you can like tempt it and lure it with a beautiful juicy carrot, or you can hit it with a stick. Now, no animal cruelty here, right? But that was the phrase that came to mind to me when I was talking to this mentor. I was like, she was talking about me being kinder to myself and stop having such high expectations. I was like, no, like I really enjoy being busy. No. I like really pride myself on being super productive, and I just do 10 times as much as other people, and that's totally fine. And, you know, I don't really want to like have these like rewards for myself or whatever. Yeah, sure, I'll go out to dinner or whatever, but I'm more motivated by, oh my God, that urgent deadline is coming. You must get it done. I'm motivated by the urgency. I love the thrill of that deadline. Now, tell me you at that point in time, Tash, were undiagnosed ADHD without telling me you were undiagnosed ADHD. I need a deadline, right? Totally understand that about myself now. But just because I am now diagnosed ADHD and I now see why a deadline really gets me into action doesn't mean that I have to live my life with 45. Why do I keep saying 45? That's really weird. Sorry, this is Podcarpet, so my little tangents will be followed. But like if every day I have to have deadline, red thing, punishment, like is that actually going to be sustainable for me long term? Like just because I'm someone who's motivated by a deadline doesn't mean my life has to be filled with multiple deadlines a day. Doesn't mean I have to overload myself in order to be successful. And I think that's where that like real difference has come for me. And so when I first started my business, I was not lazy. I did not like the word lazy. And I actually wore it as a big badge of honor that like I had never in my working career ever been called lazy. I was called lazy a lot by my parents growing up, and I definitely think it's my default thing. That's just my zone of genius. Being lazy is my zone of genius. It's fine. But my fear, because laziness was labeled as bad and morally wrong as a child, and that is what I was called often. Like my dad had like 1,000 ways of calling me lazy. Like she's so economical in her effort. She just knows how to get the result without having to put in the hard yards, right? Like those sorts of things. So because lazy equals bad was my programming, then when I went into the workforce, I was like, well, hardworking and burnt out equals good. And so I really prided myself on the fact that I'd never been called lazy in my working career, ever. I had never been called lazy when I was at uni and studying. I was not called lazy at school, especially not in high school. And, you know, the older I got, the more I saw my hard work and burning myself out and overloading myself and taking on more than everyone else was rewarded, and people would note it and go, wow, you get so much done. Wow, you're so productive. Oh, wow, like you're just so efficient. Oh my gosh, you get all this stuff done, right? So it was rewarded. And so therefore I would do it more. And of course, like that's exactly how it was. But when I started my business, I carried this with me. But the longer I was in business, the more I would have this sort of seed of doubt to say, but why did I start a business? I didn't do this so that I could be even meaner to myself than my bully boss that I'd left the corporate world to escape. I didn't start this business to work longer hours than when I was in corporate consulting. I didn't start this business to be a really mean, tough boss to myself and not enjoy myself. And so I started to kind of peel these layers back. Well, why is it that I don't want to be lazy? Why is it that I need to be hardworking compared to everyone else? Like, why do I have to work harder? Why do I need to be seen as this hyper-productive, diligent, effective person? It's because that's what was rewarded for me when I was little. And laziness was the thing I was trying to avoid, right? People pleaser tendencies, neurodivergent, right? I was also middle child, so I'm the peacekeeper, the negotiator, the mediator. I had a younger sibling who needed a lot of extra attention. He was diagnosed ADHD, #boy, and also needed a lot of extra attention. And so I just quietly got my stuff done. I just got it sorted. I just plowed on. And if it meant I had to work twice as hard as other people because I didn't have as much help, that's fine. That's what I would do. I even have told this story on the podcast before, I think, that when I was transitioning from grade 4 into grade 5, over the school holidays in Australia, we have a summer holiday between our years of school. So we have summer over the Christmas period. And so we have 6 weeks, sometimes 7 weeks, I think, of holidays over that Christmas period. So I was finishing grade 4 and going into grade 5. And I told my parents at the end of grade 4 that on the last day of school, I met my grade 5 teacher, totally lying, by the way. I met my grade 5 teacher, and she had given us an assignment, a project that we could do over the summer. And so I could start the year in grade 5 with extra credit, which we don't have in Australia, by the way, with extra credit if I did this project over the summer. I must have watched some American high school something and heard about this extra credit thing because I just loved the idea of it. And so I told my mum I had to do a project I had to pick a country and do a project, and that I needed to take it to school on the first day of school in grade 5. So I spent my summer researching. I had to pick a country. I chose Tanzania. Didn't even choose an easy country, right? Chose Tanzania. No internet. We had some thin encyclopedias that we had at home, but I had to go to the library and do some research. I went and asked different people in like shops in our town. I lived in a small town. I went and asked people in shops in our town, like, do you have anything on Tanzania? Like I asked the guy at the news agency. I asked the guy at the like just local corner store place because it was just a small town, so we didn't have a big supermarket or anything. Do you have any information on Tanzania? I asked all these people if they had information on Tanzania. And then someone had a postcard from Tanzania and gave it to me, and I stuck it into my project. And like I worked very diligently and created like this big document all about Tanzania, and it had photos and it had all information about like what are their main exports and what's the capital, what are the largest cities, what's the population. Like I gathered all of this information. That's where I first discovered information about the stone tanzanite and became obsessed with it. Another story. And then when I walked into school on the first day of grade 5, I had my big project in my hands and I stuck it in the bin. That's the extent to which I thought like working and learning and growing your brain was a really, really important thing to do. And it's a little bit embarrassing. It's a little cringe. And I do, in hindsight, feel terrible that I threw that person's postcard in the bin, but they didn't want it. So, you know, it kept me feeling good. But you can see like how hardwired hard work was in my consciousness. Like I'm not talking about, oh yeah, you know, I was pretty diligent. No, I was hardworking, like, and I saw it as like my big badge of honor for sure. So these days as a business owner though, not only is laziness and choosing ease a strength for me, it's actually my audience and my clients win. It's a value proposition for them, because if there's a way to get a result without having to do something, I've found a way. If there's a way to do it easier, I've found that way. If there's a way to like shortcut your way to that success, I found it, right? Or I will help you hunt it down. If there's a way we can solve things, stop doing things, all that kind of stuff, and still get the big picture result, still do it in a way that feels like it's aligned to our values and our integrity and all those sorts of things, I will find it, right? So one of the things that people assume when they know how lazy I am, one of the things people assume I would love is AI, but I don't, because my business is about human-to-human connection. My business is about sharing like what my experiences are. Can you imagine AI helping me create this podcast episode on how to be more lazy? Like AI would not get it. And AI probably would not have the evidence that I have as a human that this is something to play with and experiment with and embrace. And so just because something is easier, in inverted commas, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right choice for me. But if there is an easier, lazier, more fun way of doing something, I generally will find it. And when AI was first being touted and everyone was very excited about it, I had a little play with it, but I didn't like what it produced. I didn't like giving up my intellectual property to something voluntarily. I didn't actually think it added a lot of value. And for me, the things that it shortcut weren't actually the things that I needed. It didn't actually contribute to the overall result. So the reason why people like to work with me and buy from me is because they like my perspective. They don't like to work with me and buy from me because they read content that I didn't write and just shared on the internet. Like it's weird, right? Like the people are looking for my perspective on things. They're looking for my advice on things. And like if people wanted to hear AI's opinion on how to be more productive, they would just ask AI. Like they don't need me to be the middle party, right? They don't need me to be the one to ask AI to write that, right? So just wanted to touch on that one because I think, a lot of people have asked me about AI stuff, and I think part of the reason for that is because they would assume that I would embrace something like AI for content creation and content repurposing and all that kind of stuff, but I don't. It's not my thing. And like I'm not going to talk about all the other risks and dramas with it, but for my own values and sense of alignment and ensuring that I'm showing up authentically, I know that's an overused word, as myself and with content that I've genuinely like percolated on in my own brain and my own thought processes and my observations of my audience also, because AI is just as racist, homophobic, and misogynist and sexist as all the existing content is on the internet. It's been trained based on content that is racist, sexist, homophobic, all the things. And therefore, like, it doesn't actually have consideration of marginalized people. It's not my perspective, because my perspective is not the same as I was going to say norm, but it's not even the norm, right? It's the loudest, most centered perspective on the internet. I am not centered on the internet. I don't identify with the experience that is the most centered on the internet. So therefore, what I generate, what I create cannot be replicated by AI. And I love that, right? I love that I cannot be outsourced. I love that I cannot be replaced by AI, no matter how generative it is, because AI hasn't had my experience. AI didn't do a project in the end of year 4 just to throw it in the bin at the start of year 5. I'm just saying. Anyway, so I thought maybe for this episode, I could give you 3 little questions or ideas to play with if you just want to have an exploration of maybe choosing a bit lazier, maybe doing things a little easier. So the first one is, what belief do you want to collect evidence to reinforce? So do you want to collect evidence to reinforce your belief that it's diligent and good and morally high ground to work hard and do things the hard way? Or do you want to collect evidence that, like, you can do more good by choosing the easy, lazy way to do things? Do you want to collect evidence that you are hyper efficient and can finish your to-do list by midday every day? Or do you want to collect evidence that you have to work till midnight in order to get the minimum things done in your business? Do you want to collect evidence that people really value your opinion to the extent where they forgive typos, ums and ahs, mistakes? You don't need to re-record anything. We just want your imperfect thoughts. Or do you want to collect evidence that people are so judgmental of you and so dismissive of you if they find the tiniest little mistake in what you say, you'll have to get it absolutely perfect every single time? Like, honestly, I feel like I'm dancing around in a field of sunshine, rainbows and lollipops and saying, it is so much more fun over here and we have so much more like play and everything is amazing and da-da-da. And people are sitting in the cold, dark, miserable, rainy doldrums and like just going, no, I love hard work. I love it here. I really enjoy hard work and doing things the hard way for no reason. I'm not saying I avoid hard work, right? I'm not saying I never like sit down and churn through something and get something done. What I am saying is the times where I sit down and churn through something, it's because I'm in a joy spiral, not a guilt spiral. I spent 3 hours last week creating a new bundle of offers. It's not available anymore, so sorry, don't ask. A new bundle of offers and coming up with some ways that I could put it together. I just got really excited about that bundle. And so normally when I set up a new product, I would do like a setup document and put all my decisions in there, and then I'd send it off to my VA and she would actually do the setup and then da-da-da. Like, we've got a good process and it's pretty efficient. But I was so excited about this idea. I was like, I'm just going to build the whole thing myself and release it today. Like, I wonder if I can. And so I did it very imperfectly. I made a sales page, a welcome email. I set up the product. I set up the price point. I wrote 5 promos for it. I decided who I was going to tell about this offer. And then I went and told them about it. And the first person who tried to buy it said, something happened when I clicked on the buy now button. It looks like it's taken me to the wrong page. I was like, oh, actually, I forgot to hook those 2 pages up together. Thank you so much. And I went and fixed it, and then it was fine. And everything else worked fine. And so if I had spent it took me about 3 hours to set the whole thing up and go and do all the promo. If I had spent an extra couple of hours reviewing every single step of what I'd done, or if I'd spent a couple of hours going through our setup procedure checklist, I probably wouldn't have had that first mistake that I made with the going to the right thank you page. But like in the grand scheme of things, the first person who tried to do it sent me an email to say, I think this went to the wrong place. I fixed it. Didn't take me an extra hour or two. Didn't take me an extra day. I just fixed it in like 20 seconds after the person told me it wasn't working. And now I understand you don't want to create a business where you have like 45. Why is it always 45? That's really interesting. Anyway, we have all these things go wrong and then like you're constantly having to apologize and fix things. And I'm not saying that that's the experience I want to have. No. But like, can we just remember that people are actually far more forgiving than we give them credit for? They're far nicer about pointing out things that might not work. And also, does it matter? Does it actually make a difference? For that person, I like to think they felt like they were really helpful for me. And that felt like a really lovely way to say, hey, like, I think that this is going the wrong place, Ash. And I was like, yeah, it is. Thank you so much. And I was really thankful. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. I forgot to tie those two things together. Here's the thing that you were looking for. And I fixed it. It didn't take me any time. Like, it was so quick to fix it. Do they now like walk around going, oh my God, Tash Corbin doesn't even know what she's doing. Everything that she creates is broken. No, this was like, oh, that one thing didn't work. She makes mistakes too. Yay. You don't have to be perfect to be successful. Yay. Now, I'm sure there's lots of but Tashes that come up for people when I ask this question. But all I want to know is, what do you want to collect evidence of? Do you want to collect evidence that your miserable, suffering, hardworking, overwhelmed, overworked, overstretched, stressed out existence is the right way to be? Or do you just want to collect some evidence that you can do quick, fun, easy things and be just as, if not more successful? Do you want to collect evidence that you have to work hard and you have to be diligent and you have to get it perfect? Or do you want to collect evidence that it doesn't matter if you get a few mistakes here and there? And that in the meantime, you get to go and enjoy nature and play board games and have a fun life. The second one is our ego wants to protect our worldview. We really do. We want to be able to say, see, Tash, I tried it. I told you so. And now I've made less money. Thanks so much. Right? We want to be right. I understand that. I literally said to my mentor in the first year of my business, I am more motivated by sticks than carrots. And I thought, there is no way you can change my mind on that. There's no way. That's just who I am. That's just who I am. We want to protect our perception and our view of the world. And that's why I put a warning on this podcast episode, because changing your view of the world, it's actually not that easy and it's a little discombobulating. And so again, it's a choice though, right? We can choose to do the hard work of staying in this world in which we have to work hard and we have to do long hours and we have to do everything perfectly and da-da-da. Or we can choose the hard work of switching up our worldview so that we can live a life of joy and prosperity and abundance and awesomeness and time freedom and actual freedom and staring off into trees instead, right? Like, both things are actually hard, right? There's a hard part of both of them. I have to work hard and I'm not allowed to be lazy and being lazy is a bad thing is hard, right? Like, you're choosing to then stick to the long hours and the big to-do list and all that kind of stuff. And that's hard, right? Having big hours and big to-do lists and all that stuff, that's hard. Like, it's a hard way of doing things. Yeah, absolutely. But also choosing to completely shift your worldview around what it means to be lazy, also hard, right? But you choose which one is actually the one that you want to pursue. Choose which one you want to play with today. I know which one I'd choose. Anyway. The third question / thing to play with is, which world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a world where you are beautifully and powerfully rewarded for playfulness and laziness and choosing ease and doing things in a way that works for you and gives you lots of space? Or do you want to live in a world where, no, you just have to work harder than anyone else will work so that you can have more than anyone else has? because like lots and lots of coaches use that as their like little inspirational quote meme thing. And as soon as I see that on someone's feed, I unfollow, right? I don't know if you've seen this before. It says like entrepreneurs or business owners work hard and do what others won't do now so that they can experience the success that others won't experience later. And I just like, just doesn't vibe with me, right? Like, do I have to really like have a horrendous existence now just so I can have money later? Well, that's working in a job for me, right? Like that's my existence working in a job. I called up a friend when I listened to the 4-Hour Work Week, because I think it's the 4-Hour Work Week where Tim Ferriss talks about delayed life syndrome, which is like we work hard now and don't enjoy ourselves, and we have to like earn the money and put in the hours and so that when we're 65 years old, we can retire and then like finally go on a holiday and And I called a friend. I was like, no more delayed life syndrome for us. We're going out to dinner tonight. Like straight away. I was like, nah, I'm not delaying my joy. I need to go out to dinner with you tonight. We're going to have a great time. And I also love the photo of it's an older couple and they're in a gondola. And I don't know if the gondola is in Venice or it's at Venice, Las Vegas, but they're in a gondola, you know, the little boat with the Parisian guy rowing it at the back. And they have fallen asleep in their gondola. And the meme just says, this is why we travel when we're young and we don't wait till we're retired. And I'm like, yep, that is like exactly it for me. I want to enjoy my life now. I want to enjoy the entire journey. I want it all, right? And if that means that I maybe don't do that extra 80% of effort to get that final extra 20% of result, I'm cool with that. I'm so cool with that. So which world do you want to live in? Which world? Do you want to live in a world where you get to enjoy yourself today, or do you want to live in a world where you have to hustle and you have to work harder than everyone else? And because that, like, we can choose to find that world, right? Once you've made a decision on which world you want to live in, then it doesn't become a question of, is that available to me or not? It just becomes, how do I get to that world? How do I live in that world? I just want to live there. How do I do this? And when you put your brain to work on finding it and getting there, you'll actually be far more likely to get there than if you continue to ask the question, is that possible for me or not? No. Or even worse, reinforcing the belief that it's not. Oh, well, it's all well and good for Tash to say that, but she started her business over 11 years ago and I only started my business 6 months ago. So she's got a 10.5-year head start on me. And so therefore that's not available to me. But like when I started my business, my friends have started their businesses way before me. And I had the exact same thought. Oh, well, it's all well and good for them, right? Everyone thinks that everyone else has something that they don't have. Everyone thinks someone else like has something that like is not available to them. But the longer you keep choosing to reinforce that, the longer you keep collecting evidence that that is true, the longer you will believe that it is true. And so, like, I'm not saying we're bypassing your actual lived experiences or your actual existence right now and what your needs are right now. I know lots of people who are getting part-time jobs right now. I know lots of people who right now, they are feeling the pinch. But just because you're feeling the pinch or you need to get a part-time job or whatever is going on doesn't mean that we want to reinforce the belief that a life of freedom and excitement and joy and laziness is never going to be available to you. And if you choose which world you want to live in, and instead of collecting evidence it's not available to you, start looking for how you get there, I believe truly and deeply within my being, you are going to get it. You're going to make it happen. You're going to find it. You're going to figure it out because you've chosen to go find it. You've chosen to look for it. And I was telling my niece actually about a study. It's in Denise Duffield Thomas's book, Get Rich Lucky Bitch. So I don't have to find the reference, everyone, #lazy. Because would me adding a reference to this actually make a difference to your experience of this podcast? No. So if you are looking for this actual story and the reference, it's in Get Rich Lucky Bitch by Denise Duffield Thomas. But she shared a study where they asked people, they thought they were going for a job interview, I think, and they asked people as part of the process, are you a lucky person? And then as people left the office, there was a $5 note on the ground. The people who said, yeah, I'm so lucky, were more likely to find the money than the people who said, no, I'm not. And like, that's the power of the brain. That's the power of actually choosing what you believe, what to look for, what you're collecting evidence of, and choosing what world you want to live in, and then getting out there and making it happen and actually going and finding it. So as I said, I'm not doing this podcast episode to tell you to like, just stop doing things and just forget about it all and just go and watch Netflix and never think about anything again, because it is a gradual process. To embrace the lazy lifestyle, embrace that easy business approach, it does take a bit of a gradual process, because we need to know what's the 20% of effort that gets the 80% of results. And so if you haven't taken any effort because you need to find the perfect effort, there's a lot of people who are stuck in that one as well. You ain't any closer to finding what your 20% is, right? So it's that embracing imperfect action, paying attention to what works and what doesn't, paying attention to what the insights are that you get from actually taking that action, getting advice and help from people who've been there before you and may be able to help you see what you can't see for yourself. Definitely love mentorship, right? But getting that insight and taking it gradually in a way that feels safe for you and feels like you're slowly but surely able to embrace the lazier approach. That is what I'm recommending, because that's how I had to do it. And there were a couple of times where circumstances and situations created an opportunity for me to have a bit of an up level of my laziness, and I embraced it. I was like, okay, this is time for another laziness experiment. And so that approach of taking it gradually, doing it in a way that feels safe, then it's not going to create this like, oh, I sat on the couch for like 6 days in a row and I didn't make any money. What could I have possibly done differently? That's not what I'm recommending, and that's certainly not the approach that I took. But just finding that way to be a little bit more strategic, finding that way to be a little bit more considered in what is actually going to contribute to my overall goal in that big picture and what isn't. Like my decision not to go and find what was the name of that study and reference it, and instead just know where I heard it, which was in Denise's book, that's a good lazy decision. But it takes little practices to feel confident to say on a podcast episode, I ain't getting the reference for you. Right? It takes a little bit of practice here and there. It takes practice to know what does contribute to results and what doesn't. I put that little bundle thing together, right? I wanted to make $6,000 quickly, because I had accidentally overspent as we approached the end of financial year in my business, right? Those like, spend, get your tax expenses down. Well, I ended up spending myself into a loss. And so I didn't want to have a loss, right? I wanted to have that perfectly evened out amount. Now, that's taking into consideration my wages and my salary and Davey's wages coming out of the business. So I didn't like make an overall loss in my business, and I didn't pull a cent out of my business. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want anyone to interpret this as being like, Tash's business makes a loss and she spends. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I overspent in the lead up to the end of financial year here in Australia, which is the 30th of June. And so I did a little calculation and found that if I could bring in an extra $6,000 on top of what was already expected in my business, then I would be more likely to get closer to it being back on an even keel. I was like, oh, okay, I think it's about $6,000. So that's why that sort of bundle idea was so inspiring. I got so excited about it. I was like, oh, it's actually a really good little offer. It's incentivizing people to take action now, but it doesn't require me then like delivering on something immediately or having to do a lot of homework the minute someone buys it or whatever it might be. But it could absolutely be a way for me to bring in a $6,000 little boost, and it's selling things that already exist. So I'm not making anything new. I'm just bundling a few things together. And so I can do that, make my $6,000 in sales, and I'm not derailing my business overall. It felt like a really sexy little idea and a really sexy little offer. So I spent my few hours putting it all together, went out and promoted it, and in the final weekend of the financial year in Australia, because the 29th was a Saturday and the 30th of June was a Sunday, on that final weekend, I made $13,000 in sales of that bundle. $13,000. Now, that's not including the sales I made in the few days before that. Like, I had announced it maybe 12, 13 days before end of financial year, and I made some sales straight away. A few sales dripped in most days. But then I had this huge, like, $13,000 weekend right as financial year came and had this huge surge. And on that weekend, I had my niece staying with me. On the Friday afternoon, we finished early. I had a call. I ran the Q3 planning session in the afternoon, and then I finished up. We watched some TV. We had a nice early night. It was really lovely. Then on the Saturday, we watched 2 games of netball. We went and met a potential new family member, a rescue puppy. We played with the puppy. We watched the Formula One sprint qualifying, sprint race, free practice. On the Sunday night, we stayed up and watched the actual race, and George Russell won his first win of the season. It was such a joyful weekend, right? And the whole time, my phone was pinging with sales. Ping, 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 ping. And it was just one of those moments where I was so grateful to past Tash for choosing to find that world. I wanted to live in a world where that money could come in really easily. And I made a lot of mistakes, right? I made a lot of mistakes years ago. I discovered my ability to create products people want really fast, quite early in my business. And in 2017, 4 years into my business journey, I did a review at the end of the year on like where did most of my money come from and what products did I launch and all that kind of stuff. And I had 36 different ways that people could work with me. And I was exhausted. But I went through that process and recognized and realized actually most of my income for this year had come from selling the Takeoff program. And because I was so busy creating all these other things that people were excited about, I never actually did a full launch of the Takeoff program that year. And yet it was still my highest income earner. So I'm not saying like I just lazily like throw a bunch of random half thought out stuff at the internet. I am quite strategic but I do that in a really streamlined, effective way. And so one of the things that I wanted to share with you, and this would be actually, let's do this as my Podcarpet. Let's wrap up this Podcarpet and I've got a freebie for you. Is I just want you, because we're into Q3 of 2024 now, but it's a good time of year for you to have a play with this. I have a free resource that's how to map out a quarterly plan in one page. Like what's your plan for the quarter, for the next 12 weeks of business in one page. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/410. And just that process of going through and doing out your quarterly plan and then having to prioritize what are your goals, what are you going to put into it, what other projects that you need to do, or what's the tasks or actions you need to complete. Like just going through that thought process and mapping it out makes you a little more strategic. And that little bit more being strategic and being a little bit more focused on what it is that you actually want and going towards it makes you a little less likely to get distracted with shiny objects that don't do anything, makes you a little less likely to keep yourself busy with stuff that's not contributing to your results, makes you a little more likely to get towards the world where you can be a little lazier, you can take it a little easier, and you can be even more successful. So that is such a good point for me to end this podcast episode on, because I know it's gone for a little while, but this is a huge conversation, right? Such a change in world perspective to decide that you want to collect evidence that life can be easier and you can do it the lazy way and actually make more money and be more successful and your business can grow. And it is absolutely available to everyone. Some people are further away than others. It starts with that decision though. So if you want to play with that and you want some strategy behind it to help you find the easier way, find the lazier way, find what is my 20% that gets me 80% of the results, then this quarterly plan on a page template is a really great place to get started, and it walks you through the process of how to fill it all in and how to make those decisions. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. I hope you found it really helpful. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Don't forget to go and grab your freebies at tashcorbin.com/410. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.